right, everybody, welcome back to Skywatchers Radio on Dark Matter Radio Network and, of course, PSN Radio. And I want to ask everybody to please have a nice sit down right now. If you're standing up, if you're running around, sit down, turn the radio up, listen in. We're going to have a lot of fun with our guest, Mr. Aaron Judkins, a.k.a. Maverick. He's an author, explorer, and an archaeologist from Texas. Don't mess with Texas. He has a passion for searching for the truth about the mysteries of the past and exposing forbidden history. Aaron, this is way long overdue, but welcome to Skywatchers Radio, my friend.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. You're right, it is way overdue. And if your audience only knew how overdue it is, maybe we should tell them.
If they had an inkling or an idea of how long I've been trying to have you on this show, it would probably drive a lot of them to send you hate mail. So I don't want to do that. We got a lot of defensive fans of this show, Aaron. You just don't know. We call them the Squash Nuts, by the way. That's the name of our group, Squash Nuts. Love you guys. They get defensive, so I don't want to have them send you any hate mail. But this man right here has been eluding us like the President of the United States. But it is so much fun to finally have you on the show.
I'm so glad to be on with you on the show. You know, it's quite odd that my schedule has been so erratic over the last 6 months, and every time we try to sync our schedules up, it just doesn't work out. And I've got a very narrow window in my schedule these days. And it is you know, and it really bothered me because the last time I talked to you, I had to tell you, I said, I'm not doing this on purpose. I promise. So anyway, it's really great to be on this show tonight with you.
And some of you listening might recognize the voice. You, of course, are a guest radio host for EPIC Voyages Radio on Inception Radio, and, of course, it plays here on Dark Matter Radio Network.
That's right. It plays right here on Dark Matter on Friday nights. EPIC Voyages Radio, Friday nights on Dark Matter Radio Network. And, you know, it's been a lot of fun, I have to tell you. I don't do radio full time. I do it, as you said, as a guest host. I rotate through through that schedule about once a month. I go on the program, but I absolutely love it. It is so much fun. I get to do what you guys do all the time, and I really have a blast doing it. It's a lot of fun, and I'm so glad for Keith for having us on the Dark Matter Radio Network. And you know, the audience has been fantastic. And the listeners have been very responsive to the show, and I know to your show as well. And so I'm glad to, you know, get out and finally get on your program tonight with you. So what an honor.
Now we're going to talk about a lot of different things. One thing I definitely wanted to bring up is your research in biblical archaeology, which is always something fascinating to me. And we're going to talk about, you know, of course, ufology. Don't worry, folks. We're going to touch on ufology a lot.
Absolutely.
But I want to first, go into your background a little bit. And so for the listeners who are not too familiar with your history, give a brief description of what you've done in the past besides EPIC Voyages. It's a great show, by the way.
Oh, well, thanks. You know, wow, I wear so many hats.
Yes, you do.
In my life. You know, when people ask me what I do, I have to tell them, you know, what day is it, because it depends on what day it is what I'm doing. You know, basically, I started out with a real passion for history and archaeology and learning. And I just love to go to museums. I love to just learn everything I could about ancient civilizations, Near Eastern archaeology, biblical archaeology. And I just, you know, the Native Americans here, America Southwest, I love it all. I mean, I do. I'll study it all. I don't know it all, but I love to study it all. And because of that, you know, that led me to schedule my vacations around going to museums and going out, to sites and things that, were just a lot of learning fun, on site, not from a book, although I love books. I do read quite a bit. I've probably read 1,000 books in my life so far, and I've got a library full of books in my office. But it's a different thing to go out into the field or just to go out and learn about those things. And so for me, that was just a tremendous thing to go do, but it was very limited for me. And then my life kind of took a direction where I pursued a different field in the medical field for many years. And currently still do. And that's why I say I wear many hats, because I do so many different things. But the medical field was something that kind of was my bread and butter. It always provided me, the opportunity to kind of self-fund myself and go out and do the things that I really was passionate about, and that was history and archaeology. And I really give my grandparents credit for that, because they were old rock hounds, and I really got an appreciation for just going out and looking for rocks, and that led into arrowheads, and so I had an early interest in my life about these things. And when I was about 16, I was out with a friend of mine. We was on a large ranch in the Texas Panhandle, and there was a huge cliff, and there was a kind of a dry stream bed, and we were walking through there, and I saw this huge bone laying on the ground. I ran over to it, and I picked it up, and it was huge. And I said, "Look at this bone." I pulled it out of the sand, and the person that was with me said, I think that's a bison bone." I said, "What? A buffalo? Are you saying buffalo bone?" And the thing was a huge buffalo bone, what we know is a bison bone. And my friend said, "Yeah, my dad, who was a foreman on that ranch, a cowboy foreman, said this is a cliff where the Indians used to run off the buffalo, and then they would slaughter them, and they would use them to survive, obviously for meat and for tool making, and they used everything on that thing. But here was a bone, and I pulled this bone up, and I was looking at it, and I turned around, and sticking out of the cliff was an occipital part of a skull. The occipital part is the back part of your skull, and it was a human skull. And I immediately dropped the bison femur that was in my hands, and I'm staring at this, and I said, "Look at this thing. This is a skull. It's a human skull." And so I, at 16, I'm looking for the nearest stick. I'm digging this thing out. This thing's going home with me. And my friend said, "No, we should leave it. We should go tell my dad." And so, in hindsight, that was great wisdom. And so we did. I ended up dropping my stick and retreated in defeat because I wanted that skull. But turns out that was a very important find. Later, the archaeologist from the university came out and documented a whole new find they didn't know was there, and it allowed the Native Americans to come out and basically confirm the site, and then of course they were able to make the final decision on what happened to it, and they gained a lot of important knowledge from that site, but they left the human bones where they were, and that's exactly what they did, and that was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So and I didn't know the end of that story for a long time later on in life, but that led into a lot of searching about what the mysteries of the past are. And when I began to go into the field and study formally and academically in archaeology, and then went out in the field, I realized that there was a lot of evidence, a lot of empirical evidence that wasn't matching up to what I had been taught. And that really led me to question, why had I never heard about some of these things? Why was it that I was learning about this for the first time in the basements, and of artifacts and people's homes. And hey, come over here. We found something over here. Check this out. Or have you heard about this? Hey, I've got something. Have you read about this? And I'm thinking, no, I haven't seen any of this. What is this stuff? And so, I think for the first time, the whole thing came to light when Michael Creamer wrote the book and co-authored the book, Forbidden Archaeology. Blew the lid off the thing. And I'm thinking, whoa. I mean, it just, my mind, it blew my mind.
It all made sense. It just clicked.
It did. And I'm thinking, this is what I'm seeing some of this stuff in my own research. And so it really resonated with me. Why was this not being taught in mainstream archaeology? Why wasn't this being discussed? How come it was being tabled and ignored in the realms of academia? And after some inquiry into some of these questions in the realms of academia, I realized very quickly that they have no interest in it, and I was basically told, leave it alone. And I ran into stories of people, of geologists, of good scientists who came across things that just simply cut against the grain of everything that we know. And they've had their careers destroyed. They've had their reputations destroyed. Character assassinations. I mean, and it's true. It's not something that is...
no, does that still happen today, though? Or, I mean, I understand 50, 60 years ago, because 50, 60 years ago, I understand, but it still happens.
Yes, this is still happening. I mean, there's people who have come out in the face of academia and said, wait a minute, why aren't we having this discussion? And I'll give you a good example, because I can say, this is happening today. Right. Let me give you a good example. This isn't really in the realm of archaeology, but it touches on it. It's in the field of paleontology.
Okay.
Let me give you a prime example of this. It's happened just years ago. Dr. Mary Schweitzer was a scientist, and still is, and she worked for Jack Horner. He's a very famous paleontologist. Jack Horner has studied dinosaurs and dinosaur bones, and so he's very well known. And I've dug up a lot of dinosaurs in my time, at least 15 different dinosaurs. I've been on many excavations, a couple of woolly mammoths and a big tylosaur. I've directed 2 excavations, one in Montana, one in Colorado. So I know about dinosaurs. I've dug them up out of the ground, and it's hard work, actually, but it's a lot of fun. Mary Schweitzer decided to slice open a bone, a dinosaur bone, and she wanted to know what was inside that dinosaur bone. And basically, she took a very thin slice of this thing, and she put it under solution and looked under an electron microscope. And what she realized was that there was still soft tissue in that bone. There was pliable tissue. There was red blood cells, and there was still elasticity to that.
Oh,
and
really?
Yeah. And so, what did she do? Well, she did what any good scientist would do. She followed the scientific method, and
right.
You go through stages. You predict the experiment, you repeat it, you observe it, you test it, and more importantly, you try to falsify the thing. And so she repeated the experiment, and she got the very similar results. And she repeated the experiment, and she repeated it and she repeated it, I'm talking 20 times at least, and got the same result. Fresh, pliable tissue. In other words, inside a 65 million year old dinosaur bone, it wasn't totally fossilized. Huh. There was still soft tissue in there, and there was red blood cells that was still visible under electron microscope. This is one example of something that the empirical level coming out and saying, okay, this is not totally fossilized. After 65 million years, it should be.
Right.
And the question is why? And so when she came out with her results, it rocked the paleontology community. I mean, it rocked it, turned the boat upside down, right? And they're scratching their heads. They're saying, we don't know. We don't have a good answer for this. But, you know, it's going to change everything we know. And so she basically had a peer-reviewed published paper on the thing. And then they realized, well, wait a minute, hold on, because this is going to change really what we've been teaching. This is going to change the fact that maybe these dinosaurs didn't die the way we think they died. Maybe they're not 65 million years old. And if they're 65 million years old, why aren't they totally fossilized? Why are we seeing fresh tissue, red blood cells in this thing? And because of that, they put a lot of pressure on Dr. Schweitzer, a lot of pressure to pull and recant her research, not just her story, her research.
That's
and because of this, they basically gave her an ultimatum. You pull it, and we're not talking about this again, or you're done. And she held out as long as she could. In the end, she recanted, and she gave up the research on it, and it's tucked away. It's gone. They're not doing it anymore. We thought, you know what? If that's true in one dinosaur bone, it's got to be true in another dinosaur bone somewhere. And so, while we were on the excavation in Montana, we called Jack Corner, and we said, "Look, you know, we know what you guys found over there, and we know you don't like the result. But look, let us offer you something. Let's do a double-blind study. Let's take our dinosaur bone in Montana, and you pick a dinosaur bone in your laboratory. We're going to do a double-blind study. We're going to see if we can match the results or if we get totally different results, and maybe we get something different. But let's repeat the thing under a double-blind study. Let's see what this goes. You know, let's see where this goes." Jack Corner refused, and well, we said, why? Why would you refuse? You know, to just repeat the experiment, double-blind study, objectively send it off, and let's compare results. Wouldn't do it. And we said, look, there's people who really want to see this done. And an offer was made, not by us, but by an independent third party, who said, look, we're going to offer you, and we're prepared to write you a $10,000 check for your research if you would do it and see what the results are, you know, what the results are going to be. He refused. So it tells me that he's not worried about the money, obviously. He's scared about the results of the research.
Right.
And he didn't do it and wouldn't allow it to be done. We went ahead and did our own experiment on our dinosaur bone and sent it off. And we came up with very similar results that Dr. Mary Schweitzer did, and that dinosaur bone wasn't totally fossilized after, you know, all these, 65 millions of years. There was pliable tissue that was elastic and red blood cells. And you have to ask the question now, scientifically, you should ask, why are we seeing this? Because the results are there. The results isn't lying. The results are saying, hey, here's another independent source But what are we going to do with this information? Unfortunately, the information got squelched, and now it's not talked about. That's one example. There's many more examples of findings in archaeology, paleontology, geology that never get to the light of the public at all, because it cuts against the grain of everything that we've ever been taught about life origins. And that, to them, I don't know if it's scary or if it's taboo. I really don't understand why they won't allow that to come out, but they don't. So it takes archaeologists like myself and others in the field who are outside of that system to raise the red flag and say, if you're not going to discuss it, if you're not going to go investigate it, if you're not going to look at it, if you're not willing to talk about it, we are. And that's what I do.
It doesn't shock me, though, that stuff like that would happen. Science has always had that issue, though, Aaron. Look at what Galileo went through, years and years and years ago.
Absolutely.
And he was like the father of modern science, and, I mean, he didn't have it easy either. So it doesn't shock me that, all across the board, science is like that. You would think for scientists who are supposed to be the smartest people on the planet, sometimes they really are kind of behind the curve when it comes to evolution and some of these things, these discoveries. But let's jump onto something that is a little bit more ufological. Has there been any cases within the UFO community of archaeologists finding stuff that has been suppressed?
Findings in the UFO community from an archaeological perspective.
Anything you might know of?
Not offhand. I would say that there is research going on in Peru and Bolivia that some suggest that there's archaeological research or artifacts suggesting that there's UFO interference or prior visitations or whatever in the past. I think there's some pretty intriguing evidence. I don't know that we can say for sure what the origin of all this is, if it's UFO intervention, but in 2011, I co-authored a book called Alien Agenda: The Return of the Nephilim.
Yes.
And I debuted that book on Coast to Coast AM with George Noory. And out in Roswell, New Mexico in 2011, where I met some of the greats, Stan Freeman and Travis Walton,
heroes,
and a number of others. And, in that book, I really talk about the archaeology findings of a lot of the past and why they're very puzzling. And for me, as an archaeologist, why I would be interested in UFOs, is a little bit of kind of an interesting story for me. It all started for me in 2008 with the Stephenville Lights, what I call the Stephenville Glenrose sighting. We know it as the Stephenville Lights more commonly.
Right.
And that hit just near where I live in 2008. As a matter of fact, on that very night, I was driving 20 minutes prior to that sighting on that particular highway. Now, I didn't see anything, but later, after I got to my destination, I heard reports about that sighting. And it became somewhat of a intriguing thing for me, because this was not just your average Joe saying, "No, it's outside, and we saw something."
Camera moonshine. Yeah.
It wasn't that kind of report. It was, the police officer of Stephenville. It was the mayor of Stephenville. It was the postmaster. It was pretty credible witnesses here that was saying, hey, we saw something. A pilot of 30 years, Steve Allen, said, I saw something. And very credible witnesses. And that really led me on to this journey of what is this thing about? Why was it near a nuclear plant in Glen Rose, Texas? And why was it being chased by F-16s out of Carswell Air Force Base in Fort Worth, Texas that night, who the U.S. Air Force for 10 days denied that they had any aircraft in that area, but 10 days later said, oh, well, we did have a training exercise going on out there, but, we forgot to tell you, but yeah, we did. Really, and it's interesting because at the time, they released the through the Freedom of Information Act, the radar reports from Carswell Air Force Base, and we have those, and it shows F-16s chasing an unknown, unidentified flying object that's traveling, they estimate, at least 1,800 miles an hour, and these jets can't even catch it. I mean, it's eluding them left and right, and I've seen the radar images. I've seen the thing, and the witnesses describe an object flying past them, and then F-16s low and flying hard. And Steve Allen has testified to that.
Now, how much do you think of this, Aaron, though, is actual extraterrestrial crafts, or how much of it do you think is our own back-engineered crafts, or just original stuff that we might have engineered ourselves?
I don't think we would be chasing our own craft if it was going. Number one, we couldn't go that fast. Not turn right angles. There's no way. You can't do that. It was defying the laws of physics, for God's sakes. I mean, there's no technology we have that can do that. Number one, a human couldn't survive that. That's why.
Yeah, but you're not thinking outside the box. We're talking about a government that has trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars laundered into the black budget projects that it probably does have.
Sure, yeah.
Who is not to say they've uncovered some form of freaky technology that really had no alien intervention, just years and years of billions going into these programs and getting the right minds to create some of this stuff. Now, I do think, though, Aaron, that we have back-engineered some stuff. I do believe there have been recoveries of genuine UFOs, alien aircrafts, or whatever you want to call them. I do believe that, but here's the thing. I don't think there are as many flying around as the population will have you believe. While I do think some sightings are real, and actually what you said makes a lot of sense. These credible witnesses, that's where I think it gets to the point where those are the cases that I'm like, okay, that's more credible to me. When you have witnesses that you can look at and you're like, okay, there's a police officer, a doctor, a lawyer, people that wouldn't lie about this kind of stuff. Those are credible cases, or a little bit more credible to me. But again, I still have a hard time saying it's always aliens. You know what I mean?
We just don't know. I'm not saying
we just don't know
either.
Exactly. No,
I'm saying it's unidentified, and it was flying. I didn't see it, but that event led me on to search what was that, and
don't blame me. Yeah.
And why are people seeing the thing? And listen, I have to tell you real quick. The reason it really prompted me in my interest is because when I was 17, I saw something that I couldn't explain. I was with 3 of my high school buddies. I wasn't by myself. We were we were out for summer break. I was going into my senior year of high school, and it was about midnight, and we saw this red light dart across the sky. At first, it was floating, very slow, very low on the horizon, a red ball of light, no flashing lights, no nothing, no sound either. My friend Mark, who was standing right next to me, he was a year older than me. This was his last. I think he was a grade older than me. At any rate, he was an aspiring Air Force pilot. He was going to be, he loved airplanes, Air Force. He was going to the Air Force Academy. I mean, he knew everything there was to know about this stuff. And he said, that's not an airplane. And I said, well, because I just dismissed it. And he said, no, look, it doesn't have any flashing lights. It's going very slow, and there's no sound. And when he started pointing out the inconsistencies of it, then I took a double take and started to look at this thing. We called our other friends back, and we said, hey, look at this. And we all stood there, walked up to the fence on this pasture road, staring at this thing. And the thing took off like you wouldn't believe, all kinds of zigzag motions. I talk about this in the book that I wrote, Alien Agenda, The Return of the Nephilim. And it did something very odd after that. It faded. It faded to black, if I can use that.
Shout outs to Jimmy. Yeah.
I didn't, but that's what it did. It faded away. And it disappeared from view, and so we were questioning ourselves: where did this thing go? What did we just see? Where did it go? And then it came back, and it reappeared in the air, and then it did all kinds of crazy things again. And I got the wild idea out of the bunch, and let's go chase it. Let's go. Let's get in the truck.
Yeah, that didn't work out. That didn't work out too well for Travis. Let me tell you, that didn't work out too well for Travis Walton going after the UFO.
And so for me, we never got an answer for what that thing was. But I think there's interesting things out there. We don't know, a lot of how they did things. The ancients, we don't know what exactly happened back in those days. I can tell you I've traveled the world. I was in Peru back in January with L.A. Marzulli, and we went into Bolivia. We filmed Watchers 8 down there.
Right.
L.A. had me study those elongated skulls down there. That book is coming out, by the way, and my report's going to be in it on those skulls. It ought to be out in just weeks. But I wrote a report. Can you
give us a teaser? I don't want to give spoilers away. Obviously, I want the people to check out the report, but give us a little teaser on the report.
Well, we went down there and studied those Paracas elongated skulls. They're intriguing. They're very interesting. Scientifically, we know culturally that they performed cradle head boarding. The Paracas culture did. The Incas didn't do it, but the Paracas culture, which is pre-Inca, did that.
Right.
We don't know why. One of the theories is that they were emulating something that they saw, which now would lend to the fact that if you believe in those 200 watcher angels that came down on Mount Hermon and intervened in the affairs of mankind, then that would tend to make sense. Because now we're seeing things in archaeology, we're seeing things in culturally coming up through the ages that clearly show that there was some kind of intervention into mankind's affairs. Was this an outside agency? Some people say alien. I say fallen angels.
Well, how do you make the distinction, though, Aaron, from aliens and fallen angels? Well, this is something actually I've talked about on the show here, where I've mentioned that in the past, hundreds of years ago, it's easy to mistake aliens for demons, ghosts, goblins, angels, because they didn't know the term alien or what aliens were, and the mere definition of angels or God, for example. God is not of this earth, right? Angels are not from this earth. So their mere definition of what they are is they're extraterrestrial in nature. Now, how much of that is, biblical and otherworldly, or how much of it is physical alien beings that we've just mistaken for these saints or deities?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. There's a distinction that needs to be made. Because the definition of alien has changed, I think, over the years. When I say alien, I'm saying a foreign outside agency. I'm not saying alien as in extraterrestrial necessarily. Extraterrestrial means a terrestrial creature from a different planet or whatever, not from this Earth.
Right, a creature outside of this terrestrial plane.
Right. I don't think that they're terrestrial or extraterrestrial. I think they're spiritual. I think they're the fallen angels that was talked about in the book of Enoch. However, having said that, and I talk about all this in the book if you're interested, but look, having said that, those fallen watchers who were not extraterrestrial but spiritual in nature could transform themselves into physicality, and they could do it at will, and then they could go back. And I think that's what we're seeing in the UFO phenomenon, because it's outside of our time domain. It's outside of our length, height, width, and time, which is the fourth dimension. Scientists and string theorists now propose that there's at least 10 dimensions. 4 of those are knowable. I just talked about that. 6 are not knowable. And that gets into Dr. Michio Kaku's stuff, which is quantum, mechanics and physics, which I find very fascinating. But I think they're able to do this, and I think that also explains the UFO phenomenon.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. If they're spiritual beings, if they're angels, if they're fallen angels, why would they need technology like UFOs?
They don't.
Spacecrafts.
They don't.
Right.
They don't need it. What they're
so
doing,
why
though,
fly around in spacecrafts?
I don't think that they're flying around in spacecrafts. I think that we're seeing a remnant of them breaking through into our time domain, and we're seeing the trails of that. Now, I think they can manifest physically when they want to, and they can manifest material things when they want to, i.e. crafts, something that we could recognize, something that we could basically we could identify, we could latch onto and say, hey, that's something that's recognizable to us. I don't think they have to do that. I think what they're doing is toying with us in a way, because they're very elusive. It's not like, hey, we landed, here we are, and there's no more deception. Everybody knows it's here. Take the Travis Walton case. I mean, I asked the man, I met with him, and I said, Travis, if you could go back to that time and knowing what you know now, would you have ever gotten out of your pickup? And he told me no. Why? Now, I think he's changed his answer since then, but he told me no. And I
told me the same thing, yeah.
Because what Travis went through was so terrible, was so traumatic, that it changed his life forever. And you never hear about people coming back and going, you know what, it's such a great experience, I'm going to schedule my next vacation around that. You don't hear anyone saying that.
You don't, actually. That's very true, except for one guy, my good friend Phil Hill. He loves taking that ride. And
there may be another one,
that's UFO
Schreiber may be another one that really enjoys that. But and I think they're the exceptions to the cases, but the majority of cases are very horrific. They're against their will. They're malevolent, and they're very, very evil.
See, my thing though with getting into the spiritual aspect of what these beings could be, Aaron, it really boggles my mind why then they would experiment sexually on people, why cattle mutilations happen, crop circles, that's a legit thing or phenomenon.
Yeah, sure,
because there's a lot of hoaxers in that as well. But why all these extra things that happen within the ufology field if they're spiritual beings? Why toy with us? See, none of that makes to me any sense. And even if they're spiritual beings, on the other side, wherever that other side is, they're physical on that side.
Well,
that's their terrestrial plane, wherever
their
that
existing
is.
plane, sure.
Right. So
why are they doing it?
Yeah, it makes no sense to me.
Well, we try to answer that in the book. In the end, this is all gearing up for something big. Art Bell used to say the quickening. This is gearing up for something. Tonight, we're having a blood moon tonight. I don't know if you know anything about the blood moons. I don't really know how much stock to put into the blood moons, to be honest with you. But let me tell you, there's stuff going on, and if you don't recognize it, and I'm sure that your listeners do, that's why we have alternative media, we have alternative archaeologists, we have people that are out there yelling and screaming from the rooftops. And Art Bell started it for radio. He called it the quickening. Hey, look at something's coming, and if you ask people that are dealing within the realms of this thing, no matter what angle they're looking at, they all come down to a common theme. Something's coming down the road, and it may not be good. And that's the thing that really bothers me is, you know what? Maybe we need to wake up and prepare for what's coming down the road, because it may not be good. And that, for me, that's at least personally something that I worry about. Not worry, but it's always in the back of my mind. What is the thing that's coming? I think I know. I think I know what's coming. But look, you have to find that thing for yourself. I wrote it in the book just because I thought, you know what? No one's really approaching it from this particular angle. And so I think it would be good. And basically it started out as a research thing for my own self. But no one really came out with that particular angle. And that's why the book really did well. Because it's a different perspective. You may not agree with it, and a lot of people, have other views. That's okay. I'm just saying, you know what? I may be wrong, but I may be right on some of these things too.
Well, it's funny because you say that something is coming, and it's true. Art Bell, he definitely said that he believed there was a quickening happening and the veil was dropping. Were terms that he would use often. And, it's funny because you could almost equate that to religious beliefs in the rapture. That, that rapture is coming, that the end is coming, that Jesus is coming back to take us away. Or now, since, ufology and the extraterrestrials are so popular, now as the aliens are coming to save us, the aliens are going to intervene. But it seems like it's always the same kind of story. Something is coming.
Well, and that's the common thread of the whole thing. Depending on your perspective and your religious point of view, if you hold one, you may have a little bit different, outtake on the thing. But look, I think they're all pointing to something, and I just think we need to be vigilant. I think we don't need to take this thing with a grain of salt. I think we have to be very, very careful. As an archaeologist, I love and going out and doing these things and exposing the truth. I think we have to, whatever you do, whether it's digging up stuff in the field as an archaeologist, whether it's, investigating UFOs. Chase Kleski is a good friend of mine who went down to Peru with me. She's at the top of her field. I think whatever it is that you do, I think you need to be vigilant, but have your guard up. Have your guard up, and that's all I'm saying, is we need to be very careful when don't mess around with stuff we don't understand, especially when it comes to these type of things that are well above us, well advanced in technology, well advanced in knowledge. And I think that's how the ancients got a lot of their wisdom, was through this forbidden knowledge that they got from these watchers. Can I prove it? No. But we see the evidence of it in archaeology. I mean, I was in Peru and Bolivia, and, we don't even know how they built a lot of these megalithic structures. I mean, I was at Tiwanaku in Bolivia. I was at Pumapunka. I was at Sacsayhuaman in Peru. I was at Machu Picchu. I was at Ollantaytambo. And these are huge structures, huge stones, oblique angles, 12-sided stones. Insane. How do they do it? Don't know. As I mentioned earlier on the show, and I've talked about a couple of times, we're going to have Michael Heiser on the show pretty soon. And I'm super excited about having him on. I know you briefly met him, Aaron, and
his work is very controversial, to say the least. And not, just because of the stuff that he talks about and the stuff that he's, gone on record as trying to debunk and putting out there. But he deals with other people that are controversial as well, like Zecharia Sitchin's work. I mean, his work is extremely controversial.
Yeah.
What was your take meeting Michael Heiser and some of the stuff that he's worked on?
Well, I met him very briefly at a conference I was speaking at. He's got some good work. I don't agree with everything, but that's okay. His work on Ancient Aliens Debunked, I found very interesting. I was as I said earlier, I was down in Peru and Bolivia, and I was very familiar with the ancient alien theory of both of these places, Tiwanaku, Pumapunka. And when I went in there, especially at Pumapunka, I'm looking for the 7-8 foot, huge H blocks.
Right.
I'm looking for these things, and I'm not seeing them. And I'm thinking, where's the 7 foot, 8 foot H blocks? Where are these things at? And I'm looking, and I realized that they're not 7-8 feet tall. They're waist high. They're small. I mean, I was like, what? This is it? This is it? This is the H blocks?
Giorgio's been lying to us.
Come on, man. Where's the huge H blocks? And so TV gives you this huge perspective of these huge H blocks coming down. They were levitated, and they were all interlocking in place. And, I looked at that personally, and I realized they're not huge. They're waist high. They're inset cut, but they're not laser cut. I took a square with me, and I checked. They're not all identical. Like they're in a factory and they've all been laser cut and they're all identical. They're not like that. They're all just a little bit individually unique, very similar. I would have to say they are very similar, but they're not identical similar. They're close, but it doesn't mean that they're laser cut. And look, I took some of that andesite stone, and it's it's not something that is impossible to do that with back, I think, for that time period. Now, how did they do it exactly? Don't know. I think Dr. Heiser brings some good points. Because look, in science, you have to be scientific, and you have to say, okay, according to Ogman's razor principle, what's the most simplest explanation for this? And when you go back to the most simplest explanation, knowing what we know about the culture and finding some of the things we found there, you have to, at least according to Dr. Heiser, say, maybe this isn't laser cut after all. Maybe there's a simpler explanation for this. I really like that idea because we tend to overlook the simple and go straight for the, oh my God,
extraterrestrials.
It's laser cut. And I didn't see that.
A lot of that stuff, though, comes from Eric Van Daniken's books, and that's where a lot of these theories really come from, Aaron.
Well, look, I've never met Eric Van Daniken. I know people who know him. I don't necessarily agree with everything that he's put out there. I do think he's made some valid points on some things, and he definitely opened the door to, talking about this. I think that's commendable that he did that. It doesn't mean that I agree with it. But personally, having been down there and researching this, it's, you realize in reality when you get there, it's not like you see on the TV. And it's a very simplistic site. Matter of fact, Pumapunka is a pretty small site compared to Tiwanaku. And the other thing I thought was kind of fascinating is that they're just a couple of miles apart from each other.
Right.
I didn't know that until I got there, and I was here. Pumapunka is just right down the road. Matter of fact, I walked from Pumapunka into town of Tiwanaku from that site because there was no room on the bus for me, and so I just walked into town. And so Pumapunka is relatively a small site, It's a nice place. I mean, when I say nice, it's not nice like here in North America. Nice.
Yeah, it's not like the big city. Yeah, it's not the big city.
You know, you're in Bolivia, okay? It's but it's a very neat country, culturally rich. I loved it. I really did. I want to go back. Peru, the same thing. Culturally rich, lots of history. It's very fascinating. I went all over the country. I stayed a month, and I really want to go back because you just can't learn it all in one trip. But look, I went down there to study those elongated skulls. This report that I'm writing for L.A. Marzulli is going to be out in his book very soon. It's going to be called On the Trail of the Nephilim, Volume 2. And that's coming out very soon. And then, of course, we filmed Watchers 8, which is L.A.'s series on the Watchers, and that's out now. As a matter of fact, people have asked me to publish my journal on my Peru trip. I recently did that with my Mount Ararat expedition last fall in eastern Turkey. People asked me to publish that journal, and I decided to do that. I originally wasn't going to, but I went ahead and did that, and the pre-order for that is up now at aaronjudkins.com. And people's asked me about the Peru Journal, so I thought, yeah, why not? I'm going to do that. So the Peru Journal is going to be coming out next, hopefully by the end of the year. I'm not sure, but if you go to aaronjudkins.com, it'll be up on that website, and then I should have a link to the book of On the Trail of the Nephilim, Volume 2, with the report in it. By the way, I'm going to be at Laughlin, Nevada in November 14th. This Back to the Future conference there, November 14th, 15th, and 16th of this year, 2014. Laughlin, Nevada. I'm going to be speaking on November 14th. It's going to be a great conference. A lot of great people are going to be there, speakers, including Chase Kleski and George Noory and a host of others. But if you're interested in the Back to the Future conference in Laughlin, Nevada, it's at the Aquarius Hotel, and just go to my website, aaronjudkins.com, or you can go to starworksusa.com, starworksusa.com, and register for that. It ought to be a really interesting conference over there.
I love that name, by the way, Back to the Future Conference.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah,
it's a great name.
I know.
It's funny because I going back to what we were talking about earlier with the Nephilim, I do think there's more proof in biblical history or in biblical artifacts and works for possible intervention from aliens or otherworldly beings than we've seen in Eric Van Daniken's books. A lot of the stuff I believe has been mislabeled and translated by him, but the Nephilim is an intriguing factor in this whole thing because that's literally taken from the Bible.
Well, the Nephilim is something that I really wanted to write about, also in the book called Alien Agenda: The Return of the Nephilim. That book is up on the website at aaronjudkins.com. But pardon me, but the Nephilim is a very intriguing factor into all this because they were the offspring of those fallen angels.
Right.
There's a lot of literature in the ancient accounts about these Nephilim, or known as giants. And we know, at least through the ancient cultures, that they have a lot of story about giants. Even the Native Americans have stories of giants. And it's very interesting that there's a whole link to all this, back to that story. And I think that there's a commonality between, just like the commonality between the Aztecs and the Incas and the Egyptians and the Mesopotamians, in ancient Ur, you see pyramids. The very first pyramids were the step pyramids, not in Egypt, but in ancient Mesopotamia.
Yep.
And then you see them in South and Central America, and they're going back to the step pyramids again. And you have to ask yourself, why are they going back to step pyramids? And the answer is because they're performing human sacrifice on top of those things. And they're doing something, they're taking it to the next level. The Aztecs took that whole thing to the next level, and they took you up there, man, and they cut your heart out while you were alive. I mean, these guys were brutal.
No kidding.
They were like the Scythians, man. The Scythians were brutal, too. You know, a lot of these guys in the ancient past, you know, they were not kind. If
they weren't cookie cutter civilizations.
Yeah, you would suffer terribly. And of course the Aztecs, we know that, you know, they would cut your heart out and sacrifice you and throw you down. That's not movie stuff. That's reality.
Reality, yeah.
And we know that from an archaeological point of view. Just recently they found a mass grave under one of those, or nearby, I should say, one of the step pyramids. We know that's all true. We know culturally that they practice that. The thing we have to ask ourselves is why? Why would they do that? It's because they worshipped a deity called Quetzalcoatl, and Quetzalcoatl promised them forbidden knowledges in the mathematics and sciences, if yet they would only perform human sacrifice and worship that deity. That's not Aaron's theory. That's written in the Aztecs, you know, literature. That's written in their archives. That is a known fact. So they took it to the next level, and they were doing this thing, so we see that yes, that there's a commonality in giants as well throughout the cultures, even in Native Americas, the Paiutes, the Cherokees, the Choctaws, etc. And we know that at Lovelock Cave in Nevada, the Paiutes just not too long ago said there were giants in those caves, and you know what? They discovered the skeletons of these things and the skulls in these caves. And I have to tell you that for some reason that didn't get collected by the Smithsonian, and we've got pictures of those skulls, and they found pestles at the entrance of the cave. A pestle is a big stone rock that they used to grind, corn or maize or whatever, and mesquite beans, and they would use it to crush and grind with. Okay, it's a stone, and they found two pestles towards the mouth of the cave. One weighed 25 pounds, wow, and the other one weighed 40 pounds. One pestle weighed 25 pounds, the other weighed 40. Now you have to say, why? What normal person could pick up a 25-pound pestle? Some lady that, Native American who's making the meal for the day, and she's going to use a 25-pound pestle and a 40. No,
it makes no sense.
These were giants, and the Paiutes said that they were giants, and they were cannibalistic. And so we've done a lot of research on that too, which is very interesting. That yes, I think it ties back into the Nephilim. We talked about it in Watchers Aid. We talked about it in the book that I wrote. That's a plausible theory. Were the Paracas culture emulating something they saw
from the gods? Yeah.
So very interesting.
It makes perfect sense. In fact, we saw something like this in the movie Star Trek Into Darkness, where it starts off in planet Nibiru, the very beginning, and the natives see the starship at the end of the very first scene, and then they start drawing. So these old cultures would emulate whatever they would see. That is actually a factual thing that they showed in that movie. This is why the Prime Directive would exist.
Yeah, we don't know what they were doing. We can't really prove it, but the theory is, one of the theories is that they were emulating something they saw. It was because of it was royalty or showmanship of power, or it could be for aesthetics, for beauty. We don't really know, but at this point, it's a working theory. I think it's plausible. So we just don't know. The skulls are very interesting, I have to say.
That is very interesting stuff. But what is the end agenda, though? I mean, the Nephilim agenda. What is their end agenda? What's the end game for the Nephilim?
To thwart mankind. The end game is to thwart mankind and to ultimately deceive mankind. And they have very alternative motives and means to do so. The tool is deception. and the goal is destruction. And I personally think that that's what they are doing, not just to mankind, to everyone, to the earth. This is going bad. And look, when full disclosure happens, and I think it will, these guys aren't playing by the rules because they don't have to. They're outside of the rules. They're outside of our system. They're outside of everything we've known, and they're going to be powerful beings. I think we have to be ready and vigilant, not only physically. I think you have to prepare yourself spiritually as well. And that's part of the...
Yeah, but what defense could we really take against a superior race of beings or angels or whatever these things are? I mean, how could we possibly defend ourselves?
You don't accept their message. You don't accept what they're telling you because, remember, they don't play by the rules. They use deception as a tool, and in the end, they have their way. Deception is always a tool they use in a lot of the abduction cases. We don't talk about abduction cases in the book, but we do talk about one case. And look, deception is always a tool that they use. Or if they don't use deception, they just take you by force and against your will. That's right. Why I say you have to be not only physically prepared. Yes, we need to be physically prepared for what's coming down the pike, but you have to be prepared spiritually. We are spiritual beings. Now, as an archaeologist and scientist, you say, "Oh, how can you say that?" But you know what? I think it's something that you have to know for yourself. But there's a lot of evidence that people are not only physical, but we're spiritual beings as well, and we have a soul, which is comprised of our mind, our will, and our emotions. And when you throw all that together, that makes us. Makes who we are. And the ancients even thought so. After we died, this isn't it. Why do you think the Egyptians buried you with everything that you ever had and killed all your servants? And why do you think that they performed very complex ceremonies? Mm-hmm. Not just the Egyptians, but others as well. And they did that because they believed in an afterlife. They believed that this was not the end, that this was only the beginning. And I have to agree. This journey in life is only the beginning. It's not the end. But what we do now determines our destiny and eternity. And I think that's very important for what we do now, how we live now, what we do with this gifted life. Look, I have to tell you, I wasn't going to say this, but look, I just lost some buddies in a helicopter crash, and I had to go out there and rescue them. My own crew. I had to pull my buddies out of a burning helicopter 3 nights ago. Oh, and it really hits home because you realize how short this life is. Mm-hmm. And you have to be ready. And, bad things happen to good people. And I have to tell you, it hurts. It hurts because those were my friends in that helicopter. And I got thrusted into a situation where, my God, I'm pulling my own crew out. And the reason I say that is to say this: you have to be ready. Life is short. Don't live life the way that you're not supposed to live. Live it to your fullest. And I think if you know that you're doing what you're supposed to do it until until you're gone. That's what we're supposed to do. Don't live life haphazardly. Don't live it on the couch. Get up and do something. And and it really, for me, a long time ago, I decided for me that I'm not going to, if I reach to an old age and I'm talking to my grandchildren, I decided this: I am not going to tell them, I wish I would have done this in my life. I wish I would have gone to Eastern Turkey and actually climbed Mount Ararat. and went on that expedition. I wish I would have gone to Peru. I wish I would have gone to these sites and studied. I wish I would have done this. I regret this, and I decided a long time ago, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say, you know what? I did the hard thing. I got up and I went. I got up and I went on this expedition. I did the hard thing. I did the things that no one else was doing. I was passionate about my thing. I didn't stay on the couch, and I didn't live life with regret. And I think for me, you know what? That propelled me to go say, you know what? It's never too late to pursue your passion. I was in the medical field, and I still am. And that's one of those hats I was wearing the other night when I pulled my buddies out of that helicopter crash, Wichita Falls, Texas. They crashed a block behind our base. Terrible thing.
Terrible.
You know what?
When you go through something like that, it really does put into perspective, and like you said, how short life is, but not only that, I mean, it puts a lot of other things into perspective, how much time we waste on meaningless things instead of spending it with people we care about and people that love us back and doing, the right things in life. That's really what life is all about, is, connecting with human beings and loving each other. But sadly, we don't do enough of that. It's more hatred.
Doing that, and you know what? I came home, I hugged my family, and I do anyway. But you know what? It just gives a little bit newer meaning on life.
But you hugged them a little extra tighter.
You do. But you know what? It's about finding the truth, and once you come to the knowledge of the truth, then you can live your life freely. You can live your life passionately. See, it's one thing to be always searching for the truth, but it's another thing to never find it. And I think there's a big difference in searching for the truth and finding the truth. And but look, you have to be able to go and search. If you don't,
I agree.
Then you are, I think, wasting time. For me, that's why I like going and researching these things, doing these things that I do. I realize and I recognize that not everybody can go do that. And I'm very blessed to be able to go and do a lot of these things. And it's been a lot of fun because I bring it back to the listeners. I bring it back to the people, and I say, here's the next thing. Here's what's going on. And I lay it out on the table. And I really don't say, here it is. This is what you should believe. I say, here it is. Make up your own mind. And it's okay to disagree. I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there. You know what? Here it is. Let's talk about it. You want to disagree? Fine. I'm just going to lay it out there. And I think that's what's great about it. By the way, the film's coming out. Hopefully this winter, Finding Noah. If you go to findingnoah.com, it's a theatrical documentary that documents our journey to eastern Turkey, Mount Ararat, in search of Noah's Ark. That's cool. Coming out this winter. And look, I really need some help from your listeners. So tomorrow I'm going to be on with the network execs for the History Channel, and they're going to be looking at doing a show with me on biblical archaeology. So if you're interested in seeing Maverick, old Mav here, going on the History Channel on a new show, I really need your input. Go to aaronjudkins.com, and on the bottom left of the screen, it'll say poll, and I really need you to put in your honest opinion on that poll. I need you to vote because they're going to be looking at this in the morning. So please go on to aaronjudkins.com, go to the poll, vote, and then go to Facebook to Man vs. Archaeology and put in your comment. Yes, we want to see a show. And comments, suggestions are welcome. This thing is going to happen in the morning. So your suggestions, your vote on the poll will count tonight up until 11 a.m. Central Time in the morning. And your input is very valued and very appreciated. And so thanks for doing that.
Very cool. Hopefully everybody listening in can go over there and vote. Aaron, we're out of time, unfortunately, my friend. We have to have you back on soon so we can continue talking because it's fascinating talking to you and to people like you that do the work you do. You are like a real-life Indiana Jones.
Thank you. You
really are. You really are.
It's a lot of fun to be able to go do that. I really appreciate the comment. And thanks, guys, for following me and my work. I really love all you guys, and thanks for your show. It's been great being your guest.
It's been great having you on, and don't evade us like the president, like you're doing.
I promise.
Come back on.
Guys,
it's been a blast having Aaron on here, and thank you all for listening in to Skywatchers Radio. For Keith Rowland, our webmaster, for my absentee co-host, Alan Weiler, who unfortunately had his headset crushed by the TSA. I'm not even kidding about that, by the way. We'll talk about that next week on the show. I want to thank everybody again for listening in, and it's been a blast. We're going to be back next week with a huge guest. It's going to be a lot of fun the next few months. Travis Walton coming up, Michael Heiser coming up, Stephen Bassett coming up, Stanton Friedman coming up. It just gets bigger and bigger and better right here on Dark Matter Radio Network. Keep listening. A lot of great shows coming up on both networks, both PSN and Dark Matter Radio Network. Good night, everybody. Take care and keep looking up to the skies.